This is the story of how one lie changed everything, how a single sentence I set out of fear and desperation unraveled the life I thought I wanted. I never imagined I'd be the kind of person to carry a secret this heavy, or to look into the eyes of someone I loved and lie with every breath I took. But I did. It started with a pause. We were sitting in the car after dinner, that quiet kind of stillness that comes when you've run out of small talk and don't quite know how to step into the big stuff. James was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift close to mine, but not touching. I remember the way the lights outside flickered across his face as he said, "I've been thinking maybe we should start trying for a baby." And I froze. I should have just told him the truth, that I didn't want children, that I'd always known that about myself, that the idea of becoming a mother felt like putting on someone else's skin. But the words wouldn't come. All I saw in that moment was his face full of hope, and all I felt was fear that if I told him what I really wanted, he'd walk away. So I lied. "I actually can't," I said, staring straight ahead. "Doctors told me I'm infertile. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't planned. It just spilled out of me like something I'd always believed." I could feel my hands trembling in my lap as I waited for him to say something, anything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he squeezed my hand and said, "Then we'll just have each other. That's enough for me." I nodded, smiled, even let a tear fall like it meant something else. But inside, I felt like I'd stolen something. I had no diagnosis, no tests, just a fear I'd dressed up as fate. If this hits close to home, like and subscribe. It helps me keep telling the truth. Have you ever been in a situation like this? I'd love to hear. Back then, I convinced myself I did it out of love, that I was saving us both from a fight we couldn't win. James was the first man who ever made me feel safe, like I wasn't too much or too different. He was steady, kind, and utterly devoted. And I wanted that so badly. I wanted him. But as the years passed, I started to wonder what it cost him. We didn't talk about children again, at least, not directly. But I'd catch him watching other families in restaurants, or lingering a little too long when our friends passed around their new babies. Once, I found him alone in the nursery aisle of a store while we were shopping for a friend's baby shower. He laughed it off, said he was just killing time, but I saw the way his fingers brushed a tiny onesie. I saw what it meant, and every time, guilt curled tighter around my ribs. At night, I'd lie awake and wonder if I'd stolen more than just the truth, if I'd stolen the version of life James actually wanted. But I didn't confess. I told myself it was too late, that admitting it now would only hurt him more, that maybe, eventually, the longing in his eyes would fade. It didn't. It just turned into something else, something heavier. A quiet sadness that settled between us like dust. We still laughed, still shared kisses, and made dinner, and sent each other funny memes. But there was always a space between us that we never quite crossed anymore. And I kept thinking, this is the bed you made. Lie in it. Still, part of me wondered, what if? What if I had been honest from the beginning? Would he have left? Would I have ended up alone? Or worse? What if he stayed, but loved me a little less for it? So I held on to the lie like it was a lifeline, not knowing it was actually an anchor, not knowing that someday it would drag everything down with it. The loneliness didn't hit all at once. It seeped in slowly, like water through a crack in the foundation, almost invisible until you're ankle deep and cold. James and I still functioned like a good couple. We cooked dinner together, watched crime documentaries on the couch, took weekend trips to the lake house his parents left us. From the outside, we looked steady, maybe even enviable. But on the inside, I felt hollow, like I was playing the role of a wife in a story I no longer recognized. He never brought up kids again, not directly, but I could feel the ache in the spaces between our conversations. When his coworker invited us to their toddler's birthday party, he went alone. I've got a migraine, I told him, pressing a hand to my temple with all the theater of a worn-out actress. He nodded too quickly, like he expected it. When he came home, he smelled like frosting and baby shampoo. He didn't say anything, just left a balloon animal on the kitchen counter. I stared at it for a long time before I popped it with a knife. I told myself he was just going through something, that everyone has regrets, that we could still be happy. But truthfully, I had never been lonelier. I started staying late at work, not because I had deadlines, just because it was easier to be in a room full of noise and movement than to come home to the sound of James breathing next to me in the dark. I watched people laugh by the coffee machine. I said yes to team lunches I used to avoid. I even started wearing makeup again, like I needed to remind myself that I could still be seen. That's where I met Aiden. He wasn't flashy or particularly handsome. He had one of those faces that grew on you warm eyes, a quiet confidence. He was a contractor consulting on our new client dashboard, which meant he was in and out of meetings with my team all week. The first time he spoke to me, it was just a simple, "You always seem like you're carrying the weight of 3 people." I laughed, but it hit me like a gut punch. He had seen me. The thing about loneliness is that it makes attention feel like a miracle, like air after you've been underwater too long. I started seeking him out, offering to walk to meetings together, sitting next to him during group lunches. It wasn't flirtation, not at first. It was connection. It was remembering that I still existed beyond the walls of my marriage. One day, we got stuck working late in the office after a glitch in the system triggered a rollback. Everyone else bailed, but Aiden stayed. We ordered greasy Chinese food and sat on the floor of the break room, passing a bottle of soda back and forth like teenagers. "I never wanted kids," he said suddenly, unprompted. I know that's not something you're supposed to admit out loud, but I figured it out early. Just not built for that kind of life. You know, my heart twisted. I should have nodded, let the moment pass, but instead, I said, "Me too." It was the first time I'd said it out loud. The truth, not the infertility lie, just the simple, raw truth of who I was. And it felt freeing after that night. Something shifted. We started texting outside of work. Harmless things at first, funny links, random observations, then longer threads, late night thoughts, conversations we didn't dare have with anyone else. I started smiling at my phone again, laughing, feeling alive. James noticed. Of course he did. He asked if I was okay more often, started planning more date nights. He was trying, God. He was trying, and I hated myself for not being able to meet him halfway. But once you feel seen, really seen, it's hard to go back to invisibility. One night, James was already asleep when I got a message from Aiden. Just 3 words. "You up?" Stranger, I didn't answer. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I slipped out of bed, grabbed a blanket, and curled up on the couch with my phone in my hand, heart pounding. I hadn't crossed the line yet, but I was standing at the edge, and I could feel the wind pushing me forward. It started with coffee. Nothing scandalous, nothing I couldn't explain. Aiden and I met up on a Saturday morning under the guise of discussing a potential freelance side project. We sat at a little corner cafe I'd never been to before, tucked away from the world I actually belonged in. I kept checking the time, as if someone might be watching, but no one knew, no one cared. It was just coffee, except it wasn't. He made me laugh so hard, I choked on my drink. And when he handed me a napkin, our hands brushed. That tiny, insignificant touch sent a jolt through me that I hadn't felt in years. My stomach flipped, like I was 16 again, like I wasn't a married woman with a lie stretching like a crack through the center of her marriage. We didn't kiss, we didn't even hug goodbye, but when I got back in my car, I sat there for a full 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to calm my racing heart. This wasn't a crush. It was a choice waiting to happen, and I made it slowly, steadily, one rationalization at a time. We kept meeting up, cafes, lunch breaks, walks to clear our heads. We joked about our fake project for a while, then dropped the pretense altogether. The truth was, we enjoyed each other. We filled each other's in empty spaces. One rainy Wednesday afternoon, we ducked into a bookstore to escape the weather. He handed me a copy of The Unbearable Lightness of Being and said, "This book ruined me in college, but in a good way." I took it. "I've never read it. You should," he said, then leaned in just a little too close. "I think you'd understand it." We stood like that still, suspended for a heartbeat too long. That was the moment the line disappeared. After that, things blurred. One night, I stayed late at work again. He offered to walk me to my car, then to grab a drink. I should have said no, but I didn't. We ended up in a quiet bar downtown, the kind with dim lights and barely there music. We sat in a booth tucked in the corner, and this time, when his hand brushed mine, I didn't pull away. I kissed him first. I don't know what I expected to feel: guilt, regret, shame, maybe all of it. Instead, I felt something snap inside me, a tension that had been building for years finally breaking loose. My head was spinning, my heart pounding, but in that moment, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like breathing. That night changed everything. We didn't talk about it afterward. We didn't need to. It became part of the rhythm. He didn't ask about James. I didn't offer. We existed in this strange, stolen space between reality and escape, and I hated how much I loved it. But nothing gold stays. Right about a month later, I woke up feeling off. Not sick, not tired, just different. It's hard to explain. My body felt quieter, like it was keeping a secret from me. I brushed it off at first. Stress. Maybe. I was juggling two lives, after all. But then I started noticing the signs sensitive to smell, weird food aversions, a few days late, then more than a few. I still didn't panic. I told myself it was hormones, or maybe early perimenopause, something benign, but deep down, I knew. One afternoon, I stood in the pharmacy aisle, staring at the rows of pregnancy tests like they were weapons. I picked the cheapest one, told myself it was just to rule it out at home. I didn't even wait. I went straight to the bathroom, hands shaking, heart pounding. 3 minutes never felt so long. When I looked down and saw those 2 pink lines, I felt the floor vanish beneath me. Pregnant, I was pregnant. I sat on the cold tile floor for a long time, the test clutched in my hand like a detonator. My mind ran in circles. This couldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. I had told my husband I was infertile, and now I was carrying someone else's child. No plan, no backup lie, just the truth growing inside me, kicking down every door I'd ever closed. I didn't tell anyone, not Aiden, not James, not even my best friend, who'd been trying to get pregnant herself for over a year. I told myself I needed time to think, time to breathe, time to find a version of this story that wouldn't destroy everything, but every day. The secret inside me grew. The irony was unbearable. The very thing I had used to protect my marriage infertility was now the one thing that could rip it apart. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the years of pretending. The decision I made in the car that night with James, when I chose fear over honesty, and now there was a heartbeat inside me, a living consequence. I started avoiding Aiden, not drastically, just enough to create space. I'd cancel plans last minute, claim work deadlines, answer his texts a little slower. I told myself I was doing it for him, that if I cut him loose early enough, he could walk away clean. But he noticed. One afternoon, he showed up at my office unannounced. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a spreadsheet that now felt laughably irrelevant, when I looked up and saw him standing there with 2 coffees and a nervous smile. "Thought you might need this," he said. I took the coffee with shaking hands. "You didn't have to, you've been avoiding me," he said gently, but directly. Did I do something I wanted to tell him right then? I almost did, but I panicked. "No," I said quickly. "It's just, work's been insane, and James, he's been needing more from me lately." It was technically true. James had been more attentive, more present, like he sensed something slipping. He'd started cooking breakfast for us again. He kissed my forehead in the mornings, held my hand in the grocery store. It should have made me feel safe. It just made me feel guilty. Aiden nodded slowly. Okay, just if something's wrong, I'd rather hear it than guess it. I looked down. Nothing's wrong. He didn't believe me, but he didn't press later that night. I sat on the bathroom floor again, this time without the test, just holding my stomach, whispering, "What do I do with you?" over and over. It was still early, barely 6 weeks, but my body had already changed. I was tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings. I Googled things I never thought I'd Google. How to hide a pregnancy in the first trimester. What if the baby isn't your husband's? Can stress cause miscarriage? That last one haunted me because a tiny, awful part of me wished it would just go away. Not because I didn't want the baby. I didn't know what I wanted, honestly, but because it would make everything simpler. I could slip back into the lie, pretend none of this had happened, keep my life intact. But the universe doesn't work that way, and neither does a body carrying truth. At my 8-week scan, I heard the heartbeat for the first time. It was the softest thudding noise, almost like a whisper, but it shook me to my core. I cried the whole way home. James thought it was allergies. That night, he wrapped his arms around me in bed and said, "I don't know what's going on with you lately, but I want you to know, whatever it is, I'm here." I almost told him. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what do you say to a man who believes you're broken when you're carrying proof you're not, and that someone else put it there? I started sleeping in the guest room after that. Claimed back pain. He offered to get me a massage. I almost laughed. Every decision I made now was about managing fallout. Every word, every choice, every breath felt like a tightrope walk above a pit I'd dug myself. Then one day, the baby kicked. It wasn't much, just a flutter, like bubbles rising to the surface. But it stopped me mid-step, right there in the hallway at work. I placed a hand on my stomach and felt it again. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a secret. It was a person. And no matter how much I wished I could undo it, I couldn't pretend it away anymore. Something had to give. Soon. The day I finally broke wasn't some dramatic scene in a movie. No stormy night, no screaming fight, just a quiet Tuesday and a phone call I should have taken somewhere private, but I didn't. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, pretending to care about what I was making for dinner. James was in the living room, watching some sports documentary I wasn't paying attention to. My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the name Aiden. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. Hey, I whispered, turning my back to the room. He didn't even say hello. I saw you at the pharmacy yesterday. Prenatal vitamins. My stomach dropped. I forgot I'd gone to that one. We never went to that one, but Aiden had been there, apparently, and now the lie had a spotlight on it. I didn't say anything. What could I say? Is it mine? He asked, his voice quiet, flat. That's when I heard the documentary volume go down behind me. I turned slowly. James was sitting up, remote in his hand, watching me, not angry, just still. I swallowed. I'll call you back, I said into the phone, and ended the call without waiting for a response. James didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like he was trying to put pieces together. I opened my mouth to lie again, to find some thread I could twist into a cover, but the look on his face made the words die in my throat. He stood, walked to the kitchen, looked at the vitamins on the counter, then at me. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. I nodded, barely. He blinked once, twice. How long? Almost 3 months. I whispered, silence, then a whisper of a laugh, sharp and bitter. But you're infertile. There it was. The match to the fuse. I lied. I said, my voice cracking, I didn't think you'd stay with me if I told you I didn't want kids. So I told you I couldn't have them. I was scared. James. I didn't know. He held up his hand. Don't, please. He turned and walked out of the kitchen. I followed him. Let me explain. I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't mean stop. He said sharply, then softer, just stop. I watched him sink onto the couch, hands on his knees, staring at the floor like it had betrayed him. Too. You could have just told me, he said. We could have figured it out together. I sat down across from him. I know. You didn't even give me the chance, and that's when it really hit me. Not just what I had done, but what I had taken away. Not just a child, not just a marriage, but his right to choose. I thought I was protecting you, I said quietly, from the pain of wanting something I couldn't give. But you could give it, he snapped. You just didn't want to. And instead of being honest, you built a lie, big enough to live inside. And now there's a baby, someone else's baby. I didn't mean to. You meant to lie. Everything after that is just fallout. The silence after that was suffocating. I watched him walk into the bedroom, then heard the suitcase unzip. The sound of drawers opening, zippers tugged, the closet creaking, the soundtrack of a life unraveling. I stood outside the door, trembling. Where will you go? He didn't answer for a long time. Then, softly, someplace where I don't have to rewrite every memory of the last 6 years. That line gutted me. He came out a few minutes later, bag over his shoulder, face blank. I reached for his arm. He flinched. I loved you. I said, tears pouring now. I still do. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the words. I don't know who you are anymore, he said, and I'm not sure you do either. And then he left. No slamming door, no final word, just the sound of his footsteps on the hallway floor, and then the click of the front door closing behind him. I stood in the living room for a long time, one hand on my belly, the other over my mouth. This was the moment I had feared all along, the one I thought I could outrun with lies and silence and denial. And yet, here I was, alone, with a child I hadn't wanted, and a truth I couldn't take back. The apartment was unbearably quiet after James left. At first, I thought I'd feel relief, like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. But instead, I felt like I was drowning in silence. Every sound echoed my footsteps on the floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the way the faucet dripped just a little too often. The space that had once felt like our home now felt like a museum to my mistakes. I started avoiding the bedroom. I couldn't stand the way the bed felt too big, or how his pillow still held the shape of his head. I took to sleeping on the couch, curled on my side, hand pressed to my belly like a guilty confession. The baby was a secret I could no longer hide, not from the world, not from myself. It moved more often now, soft nudges, like it was reminding me it was still here, still growing, still waiting. I told myself I had time to figure things out. But every day that passed made it harder to pretend I was in control. Aiden reached out the next day. I hadn't texted him since the call. We need to talk. 3 words that made my chest tighten. I met him at a park near his place. Neutral ground. I wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy, some childish attempt to feel less exposed. He was already there, sitting on a bench, staring straight ahead like he was trying to rehearse what to say. When I approached, he stood. So, he said, eyes scanning my face. It's true, I nodded. He looked down at my stomach. Are you okay? It was the gentlest question anyone had asked me in weeks, and it almost broke me I don't know, I said honestly. We sat. He didn't reach for my hand. I didn't expect him to. Are you keeping it? He asked after a long silence. I stared out at the pond in front of us. I don't know what else to do. I didn't plan this, but it's here. It's real. He nodded, slowly, like he was trying to understand something he hadn't prepared for. I don't want kids, he said softly. You know that. I know. And I'm not. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I need to be honest. I don't think I can be a father. Not like this. It didn't sting the way I expected it to. Maybe because I already knew. Maybe because deep down, I never believed he'd stay. I'm not asking you to be. I said, this isn't your life to fix, but it's mine to feel guilty about. We sat in silence for a long time. He finally stood. I care about you. I always have. But this, I think we were pretending it wasn't real until it became too real to handle. I nodded. He leaned down, kissed the top of my head a soft, painful goodbye, and then he walked away too. In the span of a week, I had lost both men who'd once meant everything to me, and all I had left was the child I never thought I'd have. Back at home, I started going through boxes, old photos, wedding gifts, letters we'd written each other back when love still felt easy. I found the fake fertility documents I had printed off years ago, hidden in the back of a drawer. I don't know what made me do it, then maybe guilt, maybe fear that he'd ask for proof. They were convincing enough to pass. If he ever pushed, he never did. I burned them in the kitchen sink. I watched the lies curl and blacken and disappear into ash. I needed to stop pretending. So I made a choice. I scheduled a doctor's appointment, not to explore options, not to delay anything, just to begin. For real this time. When the nurse took my hand to check my pulse, I stared at the ceiling and tried not to cry. This is your first? She asked with a smile. I nodded, yes. She didn't ask if I was married, didn't ask if the father was involved. Maybe she could see it in my eyes that I was alone, that I was trying anyway. That night, I sat on the couch, hand resting on my stomach, and whispered to the babe, I don't know if I'll be good at this. I don't know what we're walking into, but I'm here. I'm still here. And for the first time since everything fell apart, that felt like a start. Pregnancy made me visible in a way I had never wanted to be. Strangers smiled at me on the street. Cashiers asked when I was due. My coworkers offered seats in meetings or brought me decaf lattes without asking. Everyone assumed this glow on my face was from joy when really it was the flush of someone holding back tears every hour of the day. I became an expert at nodding, smiling, and lying through my teeth. The worst part was pretending James didn't exist. At first, I thought I'd hear from him. I kept checking my phone like some pathetic ritual, expecting a message, a voicemail, even a single "why," but there was nothing. Silence. He'd erased himself completely, and maybe he had the right to, but it didn't stop the ache. Around my 5th month, the weight of it all started pressing harder. Not just the baby growing inside me, but the guilt, the loneliness, the constant war in my head between what I'd destroyed and what I was still trying to build. I had one friend left who didn't judge me, Clara. She'd been there since college, the kind of person who'd always told me the truth, even when I hated it. When I finally told her everything, she just stared at me for a long time. "I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear," she said, "but I'm not going to abandon you either." I think that was the moment I stopped expecting absolution. Still, I tried to put things back together. I started therapy. I joined a local moms group not because I wanted to, but because I knew I couldn't do this completely alone. The women were nice, overly cheery, obsessed with organic snacks and stroller brands. I didn't fit in, but I stayed. One afternoon, during our circle introductions, someone asked me where the father was. My chest clenched, but I smiled and said, "It's just me." That night, I cried in the car for an hour. I missed James in a way that was no longer about wanting him back. It was about mourning the life we never got to live. Then came the baby shower. Clara insisted on throwing it, even though I resisted. "You're allowed to be celebrated," she said, "even if your life's messy." I sat in her living room, surrounded by pastel decorations and people I barely knew anymore. I opened gifts with mechanical gratitude, made small talk about names and nursery themes, smiled on cue for photos. It felt like I was playing a part in someone else's life. Then, in the middle of unwrapping a diaper cake, Clara leaned over and whispered, "Don't look now, but someone just walked in, and it's not for the punch." I froze, turned slowly. James was standing in the doorway. He looked different, thinner, tired, but still James. Clara had invited him. She didn't ask me first. She told me later she just felt like he deserved to know, that maybe I needed to face what I'd been avoiding. When our eyes met, Everything else fell away. The chatter, the decorations, the soft music in the background. It all went quiet. He walked toward me, hands in his pockets, eyes cautious but not cruel. I heard. He said softly, stopping just a few feet away, "Through your sister." Right, I forgot I had posted a vague bump photo and she had reshared it. Of course, I swallowed. You didn't have to come. I know. I wasn't sure if I should, but I kept wondering. About the baby, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, about all of it. We stood there, suspended in a moment that felt impossible to navigate. "She's a girl," I said finally. Something flickered in his expression. "I'm due in 2 months." I added, "I'm doing it alone." He looked at me for a long time. "I don't hate you," he said quietly. I did, for a while. But now I mostly just don't understand you. "That makes 2 of us," I said, trying to laugh, but it cracked halfway through. He nodded slowly, then looked down at my belly and whispered, "I hope she never feels like she's a mistake." That line lodged deep in my heart because I had felt like that most of my life, and I was already terrified I'd pass it on. "She won't," I said, almost a promise. "I'm trying." He took a step back. Good. He didn't stay. He didn't hug me or ask to feel the baby kick. He just gave a small nod, turned, and walked out. But this time, the silence he left behind didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like closure. After James left the baby shower, something inside me shifted. I didn't feel better, not exactly, but I felt lighter. As if I had finally faced the one person whose opinion still had the power to crush me. And instead of being crushed, I stayed standing. But closure is complicated. It doesn't seal wounds. It just stops you from picking at them long enough for something new to grow. The last 8 weeks of pregnancy were the loneliest and most intense days of my life. My body ached constantly. Sleep became impossible. The baby kicked so hard sometimes it felt like she was fighting to remind me, "Hey, I'm real. I'm coming. Whether you're ready or not." I tried to prepare. I read books, watched videos, even practiced breathing techniques like some desperate student cramming for a final. But nothing truly prepares you for becoming a mother, especially when you're doing it in the aftermath of your own wreckage. Clara stayed close. She drove me to appointments, made freezer meals I pretended to eat, and set up the bassinet in my tiny apartment living room. We turned her old coat closet into a makeshift nursery, just enough space for a dresser, some baby clothes, and a mobile that played a song I came to both love and hate. Then the contractions came. They started late at night. I was alone, of course, and stubborn. I waited too long to call anyone. By the time I was doubled over on the floor, I knew I'd made a mistake. Clara rushed over. We sped to the hospital. I barely remember the ride, only her hand in mine and the low chant of, "You're okay, you're okay," as I tried not to scream. Labor was long, brutal. They don't tell you how primal it feels, how every thought disappears except the need to survive. Hours blurred, nurses rotated, my tears mixed with sweat, and then finally she was here. The room got quiet as her first cry cut through everything. They placed her on my chest, and I looked down at the face I had feared for months. She was beautiful, tiny, pink, wrinkled like a raisin, but perfect in the way only newborns are, completely untethered to the mistakes that brought them here. I cried so hard I couldn't speak. I whispered, "Hi," and her eyes, though unfocused, seemed to look straight into me. For a moment, the world made sense again. I named her Mira, short for miracle. Not because she fixed everything, but because she survived it. The first days were a blur of pain and awe. Diaper changes I fumbled through with shaking hands. Feedings where she latched on and I cried quietly into the night. Moments where her tiny fingers gripped mine and something deep inside me cracked open. But joy doesn't erase regret. One morning, about 2 weeks after bringing her home, I got a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer. I was in pajamas, hadn't slept, and Mira was finally napping. But something made me open it. It was Aiden. He looked exhausted, older than he had just weeks ago. There was no baby gift, no flowers, just a man with a storm behind his eyes. "I had to see her," he said. I stepped aside. He entered cautiously, as if the apartment might explode at any moment. When he saw Mira sleeping in her bassinet, something in him broke. He stepped closer, hands trembling. "She's mine," he whispered. "She's herself." I said, "But yes." He didn't touch her, just stood and looked, and I saw something cross his face I hadn't expected. "Grief. I'm not here to fight for custody," he said, "or to demand anything. I just needed to know she's real. She is, and that you're okay. I'm not." I said honestly, but I'm trying." He nodded. "That's more than most." We didn't talk much after that. He stayed 10 minutes, maybe less. But before he left, he turned to me and said, "I'm sorry for the part I played." I almost laughed. "Me too," I said, and then he was gone. For good. This time, after that, it was just Mira and me. Nights were long, days were longer. Some mornings I woke up with her crying and felt like I couldn't move. Not from pain, but from fear. Fear I'd never be enough for her. That she'd grow up and ask questions I couldn't answer without shame. But then she'd settle in my arms or smile in her sleep. And for a few seconds, I could believe we'd be okay. We were both born in that hospital room. Me, into a life I hadn't chosen. Her, into a story she didn't ask for. But she was mine, and I would find a way to earn her. Somehow. People always say that once you hold your baby, everything else fades away. That's not true. The past doesn't disappear just because something new begins. It lingers. It hums underneath every lullaby and diaper change, every late night feeding and exhausted nap. I loved Mira fiercely, more than I knew I could, but I also carried the weight of how she came into this world, and she deserved more than that. At first, I kept our world small, just the two of us, Clara occasionally helping, a nurse from the local clinic doing home visits once a week. My days revolved around Mira's sleep schedule, feedings, laundry, crying. Some days I didn't brush my hair. Others, I managed to shower and cried from pride. But the quiet was deceptive, because after about a month, Mira started to look like someone. Her eyes had Aiden's shape, and that did something to me. I didn't miss him exactly. But every time she looked up at me with those eyes, I felt the ghost of a version of myself that had existed before all of this. The version who didn't know how deep a lie could grow, or how much a single decision could alter the shape of a life. One night, I was rocking Mira by the window when I got a text from James. Just one line, "Would you let me meet her?" I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding. The next day, I replied, "Yes, but only if you're sure." He didn't answer for 2 more days. Then we set a time. I cleaned the apartment the way I used to when his parents came to visit neurotically, obsessively. Mira was in her bassinet, wearing the soft yellow onesie Clara had given her. I held her a little tighter that morning. My heart felt like it was split between fear and hope. He arrived right on time. He looked older, worn, but not broken. and when his eyes landed on her, everything in him softened. She's, he paused. She's beautiful. She is, I whispered. He didn't ask to hold her at first, just watched, unsure. Then I gently passed her to him, and for a second I thought I might cry. He cradled her like she was the most fragile thing in the world. The room was quiet except for her soft breath, and I saw something in him I hadn't seen in months. Peace. You named her Mira, he asked. Yeah, it means wonder. He nodded, eyes never leaving hers. Fitting. We sat there in silence for a while. Then he spoke, carefully. I've thought a lot about everything, about you, about her. I've been angry, betrayed, lost. But none of that's her fault, and I don't want her to grow up without knowing someone loved her from the beginning, even if I didn't know she existed yet. His voice cracked. I don't want to be her father, he added. I can't, but maybe I could be something, a presence, a kindness in her life. I couldn't speak. He looked up at me. Would that be okay? I nodded, tears spilling over. Yes, I whispered. That would be more than okay. That night, after he left, I sat in the dark with Mira asleep on my chest, replaying every moment. It didn't fix everything. It didn't undo the lie, the affair, the years of pretending, but it was something, and in this new world, something was enough. Not long after, Aiden sent me a letter. Yes, a real letter, handwritten. He said he was leaving town, taking a job overseas. He needed a fresh start, somewhere he wasn't tethered to mistakes. I'm not running, he wrote. I'm just ready to become someone new. I don't expect forgiveness or contact. I only ask one thing, raise her to be nothing like either of us. Let her be whole. I cried when I read that. And then I burned the letter. Some things don't need to be reread. Mira turned 3 months the next week. She smiled at me for the first time, really smiled. Not gas or instinct, just joy, recognition. It felt like redemption. Clara came over with cupcakes, and we toasted with juice like we were kids again. You made it, she said. I'm still making it, I corrected. But yeah, I think I'm getting there. There are still nights when I wake up in a cold sweat, remembering how far I fell. But then I hear Mira stir, and I remember how far I've climbed. She doesn't know my story yet. One day, she will, and when that day comes, I'll tell her everything, the truth, the mistakes, the ache, the wonder, because she deserves that much. And maybe, just maybe, so do I. Some days I still look in the mirror and see a woman I don't fully recognize. Mother, liar, survivor. All of them fit, and none of them do. I used to think stories had clean endings, that you could find your way to the last page and close the book, satisfied that everything had happened for a reason. But life doesn't work that way. There are no tidy resolutions, just chapters, wounds that close and reopen in different ways. It's been almost a year since Mira was born. We've created a rhythm. She and I. Mornings are for snuggles and cartoons. Afternoons for walks and messes and the constant ballet of nap schedules. Evenings are harder. That's when the quiet comes, when the ghosts return. But I've learned to live with them. James visits sometimes, not often, just enough. He brings toys or reads to her while I tidy up or pretend not to eavesdrop. Sometimes we talk like old friends. Other times, like people trying not to remember too much. He's dating again. He didn't tell me. But I saw a photo once, her hand in his, half a smile in the frame. It stung, not out of jealousy, but from the reminder of what I lost, what I broke. But I don't hate him for moving on. I want him to. Because he was right, we can't rewrite the past. All we can do is try to shape the future from what's left. Aiden never reached out again after his letter, and I didn't chase him. Sometimes I wonder what I'd say if I saw him again. Would I thank him for Mira, blame him, apologize again? But the truth is, I don't think about him as often as I thought I would. He was a turning point, not a destination. The real story is what came after. The baby who changed everything. The woman I had to become to raise her. Mira crawls now, laughs with her whole body. She has this wild little giggle that breaks me open every time. She calls me Mama, and some days I still flinch, unsure if I've earned that title, but I show up. Every day, I feed her, rock her, hold her through teething and tantrums. I whisper stories to her at bedtime, stories where the heroes are flawed, where love isn't perfect, but people try anyway, because that's what I want her to know, that trying counts, that honesty matters, even when it hurts, that sometimes we lose everything and it still isn't the end. People still ask where her father is. I tell them she's surrounded by love, and she is. It doesn't look the way I thought it would, but maybe that's the point. Love doesn't always come wrapped in vows and rings and shared names. Sometimes it comes in the form of a tiny hand gripping your finger at 3 a.m. trusting you with everything. Sometimes it's choosing to face your ugliest truth and keep going anyway. Mira will grow up one day. She'll ask questions, hard ones, and I won't lie to her. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The truth can break people, but lies can bury them. I don't want to be buried anymore. Not in guilt, not in shame, not in the past I can't change. So I keep going, one step, one bottle, one whispered lullaby at a time. And maybe one day I'll stop punishing myself. Maybe one day I'll stop measuring my worth against the things I ruined. Maybe one day I'll find peace with it. But tonight, at least, I can breathe.